A number of years ago, a very imaginative, beautiful science fiction movie was made called Avatar. Does anybody remember seeing that movie, Avatar? I loved it. It was a really interesting movie on a number of different levels. This world that the director created, it was absolutely breathtaking and amazing, the imagination and it was a story essentially about an encounter between human beings and the Na'vi, I believe was their name, who were the aliens who lived on this planet Pandora. And part of what made the movie so interesting is actually the human beings were the bad guys. I don't know if you remember that. Seeking to exploit the resources of the planet Pandora. And the Na'vi were these people who kind of lived in harmony with their world, with nature, as well as with each other. And it was a really interesting, engaging, entertaining, kind of fun movie to watch. And one of the things, it was a very subtle thing that happened in that movie, is when a Na'vi would meet another Na'vi, they would say something. Does anybody remember what that was? There, someone said it. I see you. That the greeting of encountering another Na'vi, alien, another person, was I see you. And I love that. As one character explained, it wasn't just simply seeing the outside of a person. It was really an attempt to express that I see into your heart, into your soul, into who you are. It was a more profound greeting than maybe say, hi, how you doing? It was an acknowledgement of their existence. Now, a little research showed me that the director actually probably got this from an African tribe on the Serengeti. And that missionaries and people who would visit the tribe noticed this odd way in which they'd welcome each other, in which they'd stand in front of each other for quite a bit of time, 30 seconds, a minute, and they would say, I see you. Looking in their eyes rather intensely. I see you. And the person would respond and say, I am here. And I find that a fascinating thing to reflect upon, this sense of I see you is a way in which we meet and greet each other. There's something profound about that. There's something that evokes for me something meaningful. I see you. Now, in every story I read in the Gospels about Jesus calling disciples, I'm always puzzled. And I have to admit this is true because I'm not sure I would respond in the way in which the disciples do. Whenever Jesus comes to them and says, come, follow me, they drop whatever they're doing, right? Leave their nets behind, leave family behind, and they follow Jesus. And I've always wondered, how did they know? How did they really know that this was Jesus, the incarnation of God, the Son of Man? How did they really know it? Just this brief interaction, come follow me, and they drop everything and they follow. And I wonder, well, maybe it was just his presence. Maybe he was rather charismatic. Maybe it was obvious. You look into his eyes and see. But if that was true, then all the people who met Jesus would have dropped everything and followed him. So what was it? How did they know this was who they wanted to follow? How did they know? And kind of underneath that question for myself personally is, how would I know that this is an opportunity to follow Jesus? How would I recognize it? How would I know? And so that's why the story of the Calling of Nathanael is really so interesting to me, in part because we're told Nathanael, who's invited by a friend, who's told, you need to come and see this Jesus of Nazareth, because this is the one, friend. This is the one who's going to teach us, the one who's going to bring in God's kingdom. This is the one, this Jesus of Nazareth. And I wonder if a friend told me that, whether I'd really believe that, or would I be like Nathanael and have an expectation? What good comes from that stinkhole Nazareth? What good can come from that? Would my own prejudices prevent my seeing the Christ? And then it's interesting, as the story goes, he's coming, and Jesus, it says, this is what the text says, Jesus sees Nathanael. Truly looks in him and sees him. And Nathanael is awed by that experience. This experience of being seen by Jesus. The power of being seen by another human being. And being seen seems to imply that when I see you, or when Jesus sees us, he sees us truly who we are, our fallibilities, our foibles, the good and the bad, that when Jesus looks into us and sees us, when Jesus says, I see you, he truly sees who we are. And all our good and bad, and all our gifts and brokenness, in that when Jesus sees Nathanael, when he sees us, it's a gift of acceptance and compassion and welcome. Maybe that's how they knew. They met someone in Jesus who really accepted them and welcomed them. And that's how they recognized Jesus. I see you. You know how challenging it is in this world today to find that. To find people who truly see us. Right? Us and all our good and bad, gifts and foibles and failures. If we're lucky, we find a spouse, a husband or wife, who sees us and loves us, but knows us, right? A good marriage isn't about two perfect people presenting themselves in perfect ways. It's about people who've seen us at our worst and truly loves and accepts us in the good and the bad and the want and the plenty. It's really what our kids crave, if you think about it. What our kids and grandkids want from us is, I'm sure the new PlayStation 4 or whatever, but really what they want is to be seen. I know over this past year, after the loss of my mother, one of the parts of the grief of this I had not expected was the realization there was one less person in the world who really, truly saw me. And I miss that, selfishly. That's what if we're lucky, we have parents who truly see us. They saw us and wiped our butts and saw us grow up, and then we know everything about that child, and we know and we see them and we know who they are. And the value and power of that grace changes lives, transforms lives. I see you. I think one of the challenges, or one of the things, the brokenness of racism and prejudice and biases, the reality is that what creates those things is an inability to see another person. A different race, a different religion. And the inability to move beyond our ideas about who they are and instead truly see them, and the power of seeing their humanity rather than their country of origin. And how often in our culture do we put people in boxes, whether it's their religion or political identity, and we just don't really make the effort to say, I see you. One of the interesting parts of this story that I really struggle with to understand is the end, in which Jesus says, well, are you amazed because I said I've seen you? Very truly I tell you, he says to Nathanael, very truly I tell you, you will see even more amazing things. You will see the heavens open and the angels ascend and descend into the heavens. Ascend and descend upon the Son of Man. And that's a weird part of this passage, and it's hard to make sense of. I don't know about you, but it certainly is intended to evoke what? What ladder do we know of in the story of the Hebrew Scriptures? Jacob's ladder, right? This dream Jacob had in which he saw angels ascend and descend on this ladder. What's interesting about the story of Jacob's ladder is the Hebrew implies that the ladder itself was Jacob. That what the story describes in this dream is that Jacob should understand himself, his humanity is that place in which the angels ascend and descend. Humanity is the ladder itself in which the heavens open. So an interpretation of this final part is almost as if Jesus is telling Nathanael, if you look, if you see clearly, you will see in every human being angels ascend and descend. Every human being. And isn't that the miracle of Jesus' life and message? That he saw angels in human beings, whether they were tax collectors or prostitutes, wealthy or poor, lepers or healthy people. He saw their humanity, and it was divine. I see you. I wonder how often we go through our day without really seeing anybody. I wonder how often we go through the day, we might walk down the street and, God, I don't want to see the homeless person. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see the refugee. I don't want to see that. I don't even want to see the worker, my coworker who may be in pain and sad and depressed. I don't really look hard enough. But if I did try in my daily life to see, to be present, to really look and see their humanity, not only am I transformed, but they are as well. One of my favorite all-time movies is a movie called Good Will Hunting. A story of a young man who is a genius, a mathematical genius, but he's a Southie from Boston, was raised in foster homes, had experienced abuse, was an angry, violent young man. Really, the only family, he had a close group of friends, but he's in an odd way, he's a genius, a mathematical genius. He's a janitor who volunteers at MIT, and a professor discovers him and realizes that his genius and wants to work with him, but he's a young man who's angry and fighting and disrespectful, and so, and in fact, gets in trouble with the law. And so as part of his probation, the professor has to promise he'll go to counseling, and so they try different kinds of counseling with different kinds of people who've written books about their style, or people who've written books about their theories about how to heal. And this kid is so smart, really sees it, is rather cynical about it all, and And this professor really throws up his hand. He can't really find someone who can help this kid until he remembers an old classmate of his who works at a junior college. And he finally asks his friend, would you be willing to see this kid? And there's this really beautiful scene in which the psychologist struggles with whether he's going to help this kid. And what he tells the kid, he says, you know, you can pretend to be anything you want to be. Really what he tells this kid is he says, I'm interested not in my theory of psychology, not in my style. What I am interested in is knowing you. What I'm interested in is seeing you. The rest of the movie, this psychologist helps this young man just by listening and seeing who he truly was. There is power in seeing others and in being seen. To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.